Hello people and welcome to the People Building Podcast, and today I'm sharing with you a super interesting interview with the wonderful Jerry Fu. Now Jerry works in leadership and conflict resolution, but the story of how he got there is going to blow your mind because Jerry was anything but a leader or conflict resolver. In fact, he lived in what I would say was a clear cycle of lack of responsibility, where his mum mainly made decisions for him, and anyone else, really, recruiters, people that were job hunting for him, anyone else but Jerry made decisions about Jerry's life. So this is a story of a massive, massive transition. The things that I would say from an NLP perspective, and for those of you that are NLPers, you will be familiar with the results versus excuses principle that we sometimes refer to. That is to say that if you are making excuses for why you haven't achieved what you wanted to in your life, you are living in a state of being out of control. You are at the effect of life. Whereas if you are someone who takes responsibility for their results, be them good ones or bad ones, you have a better sense of control over what's going on. And I think Jerry would say that his excuse making was, and I'm being brutal here, was caused by fear of failure, fear of rejection, maybe being introverted as an individual. Whereas I would say it was a lot of excuses and believing his own bullshit. So I'm really interested to know what you think when you listen to this particular podcast. If you are listening on a podcasting platform where you can leave a comment, please do. And equally, if you're listening on YouTube, you'll be able to leave a comment there, like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe and give us a rating wherever it is that you are listening. So there aren't any trigger warnings for this one as such, but there is some talk around things like drug diversion. If any of you have seen the series on Disney Plus called Dopesick, which stars Michael Keaton, and I think he also directed it as well, then that has definitely got a storyline based around drug diversion to some extent. It's a really good series and it will also break your heart. So definitely recommend that if you want to learn more about how drug diversion, particularly in the United States, came about. So yeah, we've got a little bit of that. There's a story briefly told about how a patient was given the wrong medication. So we can see here that there was some very serious ramifications from Jerry's, not necessarily his actions, but more from his inactions. And sometimes those are just as dangerous. So yeah, I guess I have a question to you going into this. Was the desire to avoid unresolved conflict so strong that that's what caused him to work unpaid for a period of time, jeopardize his medical license? Or are we just looking at a man here who's very good at making excuses? What do you think? So yeah, I've personally got some mixed feelings around any parents being super pushy in their child's career, but I also respect that there was a strong cultural element to how that came about for Jerry. I think it's important, however, to note that your parents should never be an obstacle to your success. And I say that from personal experience because my parents tried until they were blue in the face to talk me out of starting up my own business. And look at where we are now. Alright, so from about an hour and 19 minutes in, you're going to hear Jerry giving some really wonderful tips around conflict resolution that I would recommend listening to more than once, and I certainly intend to do that. I would say from about 55 minutes in, we sort of see the turn in the responsibility taking starts to kick in at that stage. So I guess going into this, I have a question for you. Do you think that Jerry is there now with the grit that it takes to be an entrepreneur and business owner? Or do you think he's still got some big stretches ahead of him before that really comes to fruition? I'm very curious to hear about it, but for now, I'm going to let you dive deep into this wonderful conversation with the very talented leader and conflict resolver that is Jerry Fu.
I've learned either you do it or you don't, right? So here we are.
Hello, everybody. So today I have Jerry with me. Jerry is a conflict resolution coach who helps Asian American leaders advance in their career and their life journeys as well overall. Having taken on several pharmacy leadership roles, Jerry started coaching in 2017 to help other Asian American professionals deal with the conflict they encounter at work, with their culture, and within themselves. Prior to starting his coaching business, he served as a pharmacist and began facilitating leadership workshops in 2012. But today, Jerry offers a range of coaching services, which include individual coaching, group workshops, and keynote presentations. He has appeared on over 40 podcasts and plans to appear on plenty more, including this one. And I'm going to let him give you details about all of the different places and platforms that you can contact him when we come to the end of our conversation. But for now, let that conversation begin. Welcome, Jerry.
Gemma, thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. It's lovely to see you today.
hmm
So, it sounds like you've had quite a patchwork quilt of different experiences that have led you to where you are now. Where does the story actually start?
Yeah. Great question. So I think the incident or the experience where I realized that I was going to have a different path was when I actually got a C in organic chemistry in college.
And that
Um,
was not in the plan, no.
no, no, it wasn't. Didn't know what kind of plan it was going to be now that that was in play. And I start with this moment because up until then, I had been reasonably successful. Like,
Mhm.
I was top 10% in my high school class. I got into a competitive university, and by all uh, standards of Asian culture, like I
Yeah.
was a success, right? I
Yeah.
worked hard enough to get into a good college, and
Yeah.
um, so part of the things though along the way that were kind of like roots or seeds for like later problems that I didn't want to admit to was that I was the kind of guy who, I was just a nice guy trying to mind my own business and get through life, right?
Mhm.
I didn't want to tread on anybody. I was just trying
Yeah.
to, build my own path. But um, my desire for approval and an inability to say no to the most important things. And that was true for both requests and my own discipline, right? Like I had to say no to computer games, but I wasn't willing
Right.
to, or, I had to say no to people trying to twist my arm to do things I wasn't really comfortable doing. But,
Mm.
so even though I had some degree of academic success, like I was still pointing fingers at certain people that were, I felt like had taken away my time or things like that, instead of really owning
Okay.
up to the fact that I was not saying no with more discipline, and I was like more people pleasing than anything else.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I got to a point where I was letting myself get overrun with extracurriculars and not really having that discipline to stay on track with my academic path. And so of course that culminated in a lot of self pity and lack of focus. And
Mm.
um, and I said, wow, this grade is unfair, right? I shouldn't have, I could have gotten something much better if all
Yeah.
these other people hadn't done these wrongs. And
Yeah.
so you can see like traces of this victim mentality, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
my fault. And I didn't want to admit that it was my fault, but at the same time, I didn't want to, condemn myself for, these decisions that I just didn't want to, admit that I made, and I had more control over.
Yeah.
So with all that, I said, well, despite this, um, and I don't like my chances of getting into med school, and I don't
Hmm.
want the shame that comes with possibly being waitlisted or rejected from med school. So,
Yeah.
what else can I do? And so I said, well, I still want to do healthcare. Maybe pharmacy would be a good option. And so,
Hmm.
I convinced the pharmacy school in my state that I was worth taking a chance on, that I would make a good pharmacist. And so,
Hmm.
next thing I know, I'm starting pharmacy school. And
Okay. Okay.
um, yeah, so at the time that I started pharmacy school, salaries were going up, demand was going up,
Mm.
and so I said, "Oh, wow, I came in at a ripe season, so this is
You lucked
exciting."
out. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Um, and so that's when the second round of challenges started, because by the fourth year of school, I'd moved back home just to
Hmm.
help save a little money and at my mom's behest. And so um, by now, my mom had, on the side note, she decided that my dating life needed a little help. So she, had a girl lined up for me and had a job lined up for me. Well, not directly, but as soon as the offer came in from a chain pharmacy that, we had a family friend
Hmm.
who worked for them and was very much an advocate for the company. And my mom echoed his sentiments, and she was like, "Look, I don't want you to deal with the employment struggles that your dad did
Hmm.
as an immigrant, despite having two master's degrees. That he
Hmm.
struggled to find consistent, gainful work. So I just want you to work for this company that I know they're going to take care of you." This, despite the fact that she had never worked a day in her life in pharmacy, but she's my
Okay.
mom, so she's the
Yeah.
expert, and so I have
Of
to listen to
course.
her. Yeah, and so I sign on with this chain pharmacy, and they have strings attached to the signing bonus and other things like that. And so me and in my pessimist mindset, right, in the same way I said, "Oh, I got to see an organic chemistry, my life is over." I
Yeah.
signed with this chain pharmacy. I guess my window for opportunity for a job that actually offered the quality of life that I would be happy with
Yeah.
is gone. Like I'm just stuck working for this company.
And
And
hang on, when you
yeah,
mentioned the getting a C a little earlier, you
yeah,
connected that to you'd been doing really well
hmm,
given your Asian culture.
yeah.
So is that part of what was happening with this pharmacy job? Was that mentality of, oh, this is not what I would have ideally wanted it to be? Was that also related to a cultural reasoning, like there would be better things for me or there could be better things for me?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, that's basically it, right? It's like, uh, you know, there are plenty of, actually, if we want to explore it, there are plenty of people that got tough grades in undergrad, but still managed to get on the path that they, had envisioned for themselves, right? I remember
Yeah.
while I was in pharmacy school, I met a med student who said, "Yeah, like I applied 3 times before they finally accepted me to become
Wow.
a doctor," and was I willing to do that? It's like, no.
Okay.
My why was not strong enough to become a doctor. Like I
Sure.
tell people how one of my best friends from high school
Yeah.
was dead set on becoming a pediatrician. Like I saw the way
Yeah.
he was around kids, and he had a heart for them. And so,
Yeah.
when he got to med school, like he knew what he wanted to do with it, instead of me just being like by default, well, yeah, I guess I could be a doctor.
Yeah.
I don't think of anything else that I'd be excited about doing. So
Sure.
yeah, sure, the physician path sounds great.
Yeah.
Um, and so same thing with this, right? Like I just felt like, well, this thing is in place. I don't know how to overcome it, because by my own understanding, like a C is like death, right? And then
Yeah.
same thing with the chain pharmacy. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I chose this company. It's Even though it was like barely 6 months into my career, I'd
Yeah.
already decided that, well, if this is the path that I'm on, I guess that there's nothing I can do to change it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really dangerous, really,
Mhm.
because I was in my mid 20s and I already felt defeated about life, right?
Yeah.
And even though I was making, it was a nice paycheck by all standards, and
Yes.
nice benefits, but I just said,
Yeah.
well, this isn't what I wanted for myself, and now I don't know how to get what I want, because I feel like those opportunities are past me already.
Yeah. So where do you think those high standards came from then? Was that from your parents? Was that from your schooling? Was that a cultural thing? Where did the idea of I should be doing better come from?
I think, yeah, it's a combination of culture, and
Yeah.
then ultimately that translated to what I was telling myself, right?
Mm.
And I think that's part of the challenge with people pleasing is when there are
Mhm.
certain up until a certain point in your life, right? You believe that other people know you better than you know yourself.
Yeah.
And while it's true that currently, there's still people, in my life that will see things that I can't see because I know I have my own blind spots. But
Yeah.
for people to think, no, 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 I know you better than you know yourself, and you have to listen to me.
Mhm.
And it's tough. Like I still deal with those dynamics with family now that say, hey,
Yeah.
like on one hand, we are capable of a lot if we're willing to believe it, and at the same
Yeah.
time, there's a lot of ways uh, we're guilty of like confirmation bias and hindsight
Yes.
bias and a lot of other psychological tricks that we pull
Yeah.
on ourselves
Yeah.
just because we don't know better. So that's a whole nother podcast to
Yeah, yeah.
unpack all that. Yeah, yeah. But it is
Alright.
from the culture. To answer your question, it was from the culture that I ultimately agreed for myself. That's basically, I think,
Yeah.
the way I'm going to look at it is that, yeah, that, this is the cultural standard. Everyone else believes it, therefore, it must be true
Gotcha.
for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay. All right. So ultimately was mum right in lining up this job?
No. it's here's the thing. This is how I'll explain it. Is that from her standpoint, it was the right job.
Yeah.
Because when my mom was an immigrant, she came
Mhm.
over here from Taiwan to do grad school. She and my dad met in Taiwan and both came over here for grad school actually.
Yep.
And then so from the immigrant standpoint, it is the success because
Mhm.
when you have a six-figure job and
Yep.
you have a degree where people have to recognize you as a doctor
Mhm.
regardless of what skin color you are.
Yep.
That's the quickest way to kind of establish some level of credibility, right?
Yeah.
Like be profitable and be respectable,
Yes.
because they're fighting an uphill battle for
Mm.
a country started by immigrants but doesn't like other immigrants.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
live in one like that too.
oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it comes out regularly and you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself, how much progress have we made,
Yeah.
if this keeps coming out. But and so from her standpoint, right? Yeah, this is success, this is stability. Like
Mm.
stability comes from someone else that likes you enough to pay you
Yep.
something nice as opposed to um the person really betting on him or herself to really
Mhm.
go out and make a life for themselves
Yep.
that they're looking for.
Mhm.
And so, in her eyes, this is success, and she believed that she was doing what was best for me,
Yep.
um, despite evidence to the contrary that she basically decided to disregard.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So did you know at that time that this was not going to be the right way to go? Or was that resignation of, oh well, this is it, what took you along and had you go with it?
Yeah, no, this is a chance to really explain some of the nuance going through my head. Because what I wanted for myself was actually not that different from what my mom wanted for me. It's
Okay.
just different terms. Because
Yeah.
at the time, my criteria for a good job was a high quality of life, or
Hmm.
like I was just happy to work for a chain pharmacy that didn't have a drive through, but
Right.
that instead of the one that my mom wanted me to work for.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was still content to either get like an independent pharmacy job,
Hmm.
if there were one available, or yeah, like a different chain that I felt more comfortable working for.
Yeah.
So you know I think the difference is, yeah, we were both actually very naive about what a stable um, career would look like
Hmm.
because independent pharmacy, they have to do more and more than ever to fight for their own existence because the chains and the insurance companies basically are driving them out of business.
Yeah.
So they have to really advocate for themselves. And then even other chains, basically, not to out too many companies, but
Hmm.
at the time, I was actually excited to work for Walmart as a pharmacist because
Yeah.
of something. The company is strong, and at the time they
Hmm.
didn't have drive-throughs. But even if I had gotten what I wanted, working for a different chain that I would be excited about, the stability of the jobs, even in chain pharmacy, has been questioned.
Yeah.
It's been compromised because the number one, the market is very saturated. Number two, the money isn't what it used to be. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, when I found out recently that Walmart actually announced a bunch of cuts for their pharmacy staff, even not just technicians but pharmacists as well.
Hmm.
It was just a very sobering picture to say, wow, we were both very short-sighted in what
Yeah.
a career in pharmacy would involve.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious to know what your animosity is towards drive-through pharmacies. What's your beef there?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I could tell you so many things. Uh, but I mean, a couple things that really drive people nuts about the drive-through is that I could tell you stories about people that number one, they pull up and they're smoking, right? And then all that secondhand
Oh,
smoke just kind of billows into the pharmacy.
yeah.
Um, weather is not a great thing, especially in the
Oh,
wintertime, right? I remember the first job I had as a technician, they gave me a small little tiny space heater, right? That,
oh
yeah, that
wow.
kept you warm while you were opening.
Yeah.
You had other people that would say, "Hey, can you pick me up like a gallon of milk and like some like cinnamon bubble
Oh.
gum and
Mm.
some Gatorade while you're going through the drive-through?" And then you have people that will sit there and like if the news if something is wrong with their prescription for whatever reason, then they'll
Yeah.
sit there and squat the spot until you fix it, which is not great during rush hour when you got
No.
like a line of cars that all are waiting, for
Wow.
that to happen. Um, yeah, and even when I remember there was one time when someone tried to rob a pharmacy through the drive-through, and so
No.
yeah, it's just basically another point of
My
interest that
God.
is meant for the sake of convenience, and yet you don't see how much work is done on the other side because you're inconvenienced because you have
Yeah.
this other point of
Do-
interest.
I
So
don't I don't think
um,
we have these in the UK. I mean, I
be
know
glad.
I know the concept because we have like drive-through McDonald's, but I don't think we have drive-through pharmacies here.
Okay. Yeah, be glad.
Yeah.
Let's hope
Yeah.
that they don't. Let's hope they don't try to carve out space and time to make this a reality on your side
Yeah.
of the pod for sure.
All right. So what happened next? You stayed there. You obviously didn't stay forever. What was the next significant thing that came along?
Yeah. So at one point, I actually got a little too comfortable working for this chain pharmacy,
Okay.
and that's really surprised me. So yeah, the first store that they had me working at, actually, the people, they were really good, but the scheduling just it was just demoralizing because
Mm-hmm.
I'm working every other weekend, and the hours don't allow me for a lot of flexibility, to do my own thing. And so yeah, I wasn't happy. And then after about 6 months, a spot opened up at a different store that was it was 12-hour days, but it was only 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. instead of
Hmm.
like the 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at the other
Right.
store. And so and plus this way, the way the pharmacy manager had structured things, basically we were able to, even though we were still working every other weekend,
Mm.
those weekends were now 4-day weekends because whoever worked the weekend worked Friday through Monday, and whoever was off was therefore off Friday through Monday. So I was able to start
Okay.
taking little small weekend trips without using any vacation time, and I thought, wow,
Yeah.
this is really sweet. I
Yeah.
had this flexibility in scheduling. He was very good about swapping shifts whenever something came
Hmm.
up, and so um, I was like, wow, this is really unique. Like I'm basically
Yeah.
adding 2 or 3 weeks of vacation without, even though I've only officially have like two paid
Yeah.
vacation weeks, and so uh, that was fun. With chain pharmacy, if you're better than like 70 or 80% of the of total staff, like your boss is happy with you, right? So as long
Yeah.
as I'm doing better than all of them, I can kind of coast a little bit in
Uh-huh.
terms of my own development. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Were
so
you
go
happy
ahead.
then? Would you say you were happy?
I was actually, yeah, pretty happy because,
Yeah.
you have the benefits, you have that. And then if you have, I realized that flexibility and scheduling was a big thing for
Mm.
me because as long as I get to do what I want,
Yeah.
while still giving the company what they need,
Hmm.
it showed me that that was possible. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'm happy about this again. Basically, after I transferred back to a faster store that was closer to where I lived, at one point, about 11 years ago, I had a customer service incident that just made me realize I can't keep doing this. Like there was
Right.
just a really big blow up, and then I got the stink eye for how I handled things, even if I was part of the mistake.
Mm.
Apparently the bigger mistake was not being able to put out this fire, even though like the damage was
Mm.
already well beyond repair. And so
Mm.
I just said, no, I can't keep putting myself through this. So
Mhm.
started to look around for a different job, but that was hard at this point because number one, I wasn't working in my career. Like I was just
Mhm.
content to work for this chain pharmacy. And then
Yeah.
number two, yeah, I was just like, well, where do I go now that the
Mm.
market is a bit more saturated? Um,
Yeah.
who's going to take me on?
So when those incidents happen, because it sounds like there was maybe more than one incident with
Hmm.
the customer service side of things,
Hmm.
did it make you reevaluate your entire decision to be a pharmacist or just the environment in which you were working?
Yeah, yeah. It really more about the environment because
Okay.
for pharmacy school, I actually enjoy being a pharmacist, like the knowledge base and being able
Mhm.
to have the medical vocabulary to discern and get through and like figure out drug commercials or other things like
Yeah.
that. So I'm not, getting confused by all the technical jargon. That's great. It's just finding work as a pharmacist
Mhm.
is a little harder because there and thankfully there are more than enough job settings where I know people enjoy being a pharmacist. It's
Mhm.
just for retail chain pharmacy, it can be very taxing because you're cast a wide net. You get
Yeah.
all sorts of people. You use all these sales tactics to try to bait them to drive up script count and things, and then so
Mm.
people begin to start to exploit these loopholes, and they
Mm.
start to find ways to just basically get something for nothing. And
Mm.
now, you know, on the blessing is you learn to deal with arguments very, very effectively. On
Yeah.
the other hand, it just kind of crushes your soul when these
Yeah.
people who there's plenty of people who insist they know more than you just because they visited WebMD and
Yeah.
insist that
Yeah.
your education is nothing compared to theirs.
And would you say that there's a different level of respect that you experience as a pharmacist to what maybe friends or colleagues who did go into a more doctor type profession would experience? I don't know if it's a different um maybe a different perception here, but I feel that in this country, we kind of really do look upon pharmacists as a sort of second option to a doctor. Some people would sooner
Mhm.
go to see the pharmacist than they would go and see their own GP. So how was that for you?
Yeah, it's a great question simply because like if people meet me in like a social setting or a networking
Mm.
setting, they're like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a pharmacist." They're, "Hey, I got it. So I got a question for you." And so
Take a look at
clearly,
this.
yeah, so clearly like they want my opinion on some level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for in that regard, it's flattering. It's
Hmm.
just that I think pharmacy basically did themselves a disservice because the example I gave in the previous talk was how we actually give away a lot of our clinical knowledge for free. Like a
Mm.
lot of the knowledge that we went to school for and work so hard for, and the degree is not cheap, right?
Yeah.
Higher education is never cheap,
Yeah.
um, and I have to upsell gummy bears and all this other merchandise just to
Yeah.
pay to offset the clinical knowledge I'm giving away for free. Like if anyone went to a doctor and he's just like, "Hey, yeah, I can give you a free consult. Just make sure. I hope you just
Yeah.
buy some of these things on the way out." Like no one would take them seriously. But this is exactly what pharmacy has done for themselves
Yeah.
in this regard. And so, yeah, on one hand, everyone recognizes that. Yeah, clearly I have some knowledge that would serve them well, and
Yes.
at the same time, as long as they are not paying for it, there's
Yeah.
only so much respect they're going to give it.
Yeah. See, and again, that's super interesting to me because here in the UK, we have the NHS. So no one is kind of cash in hand paying for their healthcare. It's all done
Mm-hmm.
through our taxes when we're working. So you never really see the money that you're paying into the service.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes to receiving your prescription, then you do
Hmm.
pay for that. So
Hmm.
actually, it's the other way around, I guess. We don't pay our doctors, but we
Hmm.
do pay the pharmacist.
So yeah, in the next couple months, beefed up my resume a little bit, but I wanted to get into teaching
Yeah.
students, but I didn't have a residency, I didn't have PhD, and so
Mhm.
my options were fairly limited until a friend of mine who worked for a pharmacy consulting company here in Houston uh, knew that I was looking for a teaching position and said, "Hey, uh, you would you be interested in teaching through us because
Mm.
you don't need a residency or PhD because you don't have you don't have a conventional academia job wouldn't be on the table for you, but maybe you
Right.
can try this. I got promoted. My previous position is available. Would you be interested?" I said
Mm.
absolutely. So yeah, I submitted my resume and somehow convinced them that I was worth taking a chance on. So now, you know, my mom is terrified because she's like, "I had this plan for you,
Yeah.
uh, you know, the job and finances and all this other stuff." And I'm walking away from a full time job with benefits to a part time job with a
Yeah.
company she's never heard of.
Yeah.
And,
And how old were you at this point?
30. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
God love mum for still being that invested.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's what I have to remind myself. And,
Seriously, I got to
uh,
30.
uh-huh.
My parents were like, "Yeah, you're on your own, love."
And honestly, in my own journey, yeah, there comes a point where the most loving thing you can do is actually to kind of make people swim on their own.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like I like the side example I can give is, my mom would want me to learn how to cook. She's like, I
Uh-huh.
want you to learn how to cook. But then, living at home, and I'm kind of mired in self pity, like even
Yeah,
as I'm making this job, and I just want to watch TV on my days off or work out or do my own thing. I
yeah.
don't want to like do these professional development skills because
Mhm.
you know I don't like failing. I don't like looking bad. I don't like wanting to admit that I cook food that I wouldn't be excited about eating. So let me just not try. I'll study a bunch of recipes, but I'm not actually going
Right.
to turn on a stove.
Yeah.
And so it was just a cycle of enablement. Right?
Mhm.
She would say, "Well, Jerry should learn to cook," and I said, "I should learn to cook, but I'm not." Basically, I didn't want to admit I wasn't going to. So she
Yes.
would can still cook for me, and I
Right.
never learned to cook. Right? It wasn't until
Yeah.
I had to move out and cook on
Yeah.
my own, and then realize, oh, okay, I had to
Yeah.
realize that skill. So yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it? So in a way, by her giving more, she was also perhaps holding you back a little bit.
Yeah, that's a tough truth for a lot of people. Sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's not. Like,
Yeah.
I think about in athletics, right? Like, the star player will get criticism because, like, I think if we haven't won a championship, then maybe he's a bigger problem than we realize. We're relying too much on him. It's like, wait a second, like you just paid him because he's like a star player. So hang on a second, right? But yeah, in this case, it was enabling. Like the
Yeah.
helping actually was hurting me.
Yeah.
The helping, the attempts to protect me from failure and suffering
Mhm.
were actually keeping me weak
Yeah.
or were keeping me like unrefined in a way.
Yes.
And so it's I want to be sure people don't think I'm bitter or like against my
Yeah.
mom for the way she raised me, because I know she was just doing the best she could. Right? When you're an immigrant, you
Absolutely.
come over, you have no frame of
Yeah.
reference as to what's best because
Yeah.
what worked in your home country isn't working here.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's just kind of like, yeah, sometimes you just have to play it by ear, or
Yeah.
just
And I
just do
think
the
it's
best you can.
difficult to get the balance right, you know.
Mhm.
Like I said, when I was probably significantly younger, when from both of my parents, it was a bit like, yeah, like that's it, you're on your own now,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
crack on.
Mhm.
And at that time, if you'd have asked me, I would have said that it was grossly unfair.
Yeah, of
I was
course.
disadvantaged.
Mhm.
You know, they didn't love me as much as they should have done.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's necessarily easy for parents to get the balance right. You know, I don't think there is a right time to say
Mhm.
you need to stand up and do these things on your own now,
Mhm.
because there maybe just isn't a right moment for that. You just have to do it at some stage and hope that there isn't too much damage.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. Like, if you aren't failing as a parent, then
Yeah.
clearly you aren't trying enough, and
Exactly.
and yeah, 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 and you just have to trust that you do the best you can as long as you know you gave it your all, and then
Yeah.
okay, yeah, at the end of the day, no regrets, right? Eric Barker, incidentally, in his book "Barking Up the Wrong Tree," I remember he talks about he says most people are like dandelions, and that they'll actually grow in just about any kind of environment. Like you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
parents have a certain degree where they can mess up without like permanently scarring the kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you're just hoping that you're not one of those like violets or like
Exactly.
daffodils
There's a margin
that
of error.
yeah, right, yeah, but for some, right, it's just like, oh no, like this
Yeah.
one's a little more fragile, careful. It's
Yes.
like, no, you can. It's like give yourself grace, give yourself just say, hey, you
Yes.
know what, I learned and did the best I could, and I'm going to
Yeah.
trust that my kids are going to appreciate and forgive me someday, just knowing
Yeah.
that I did my best for them. So
Absolutely. So you went into the teaching job?
yeah, yeah. So, it was terrifying because, on one hand, I finally realized I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I actually got an offer. I'm moving.
Yeah.
Uh, I have to, you know, I have to find an apartment. I have to,
Right.
get settled very quickly. And
Okay.
thankfully,
So it wasn't
thankfully,
just a new job. This was a whole new lifestyle for you that came with it.
yeah, yeah. I had to change cities, right? I was living in Knoxville at
Yeah.
the time. And so, I was, you know, um, my family support network would not be immediately available anymore, right? And
Hmm.
thankfully, in Houston, I wasn't walking into a blind situation with no help. Like one of
Yeah.
my best friends from college was living there with his wife, and so
Okay.
my mom, thankfully did her part to say, hey, well, let's not just throw you in blind. Let's look to see what resources are available for you down there,
Mhm.
so that you can kind of have an easier transition. And so, yeah.
Mhm. And do you think that taking the job and where it was, were you just signing up for the job, or were you at that point where you had fully realized you were signing up for a complete lifestyle change?
Oh yeah, I mean, I knew that it was going to cost. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't have the benefits anymore. I didn't have and so yeah, it's a completely different skill set, right?
Mm.
Where there would still be some interaction with clients, of the consulting company, but now instead of just moving prescriptions, I would be
Mm.
having to develop content and drafting exam questions and
Yeah.
lecturing and doing more PowerPoint. Right, it's a much
Sure.
more involved job on that level.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was the first. I just remember the first week. Like, yeah, I was like, oh god, like it's just a fire hydrant of information, and we
Yeah.
got a presentation at the end of the week. We got to get you ready for it, and I'm just like, oh
Mhm.
my god, like I didn't know I could fail this quickly, so quickly. Like, I'm just praying they don't, fire me after. They're like, trial run. We're not happy with this. And so, thankfully, I got through the first month or two, and it
Yeah.
was. I mean, I was amazed at just how much fun I was having, like in
Awesome.
this new position. So yeah, basically, a couple months in, when the fall hit, my partner, my and supervisor, was counting on me to draft enough new exam questions
Hmm.
to be ready for the fall. And at some point, in my time alone, for whatever reason, like I either hit writer's block or other things, and I just realized that I had underestimated the job, or just other things, or whatever progress I'd given her previously, wasn't good enough, and then I
Hmm.
realized I was running out of time. But the fatal mistake I made was that I just basically rationalized that somehow she would be okay if I, just kind of copied and pasted like questions from old exams and into
Right.
using this. And she would ask me, "Oh yeah, how are things going?" I was like, "Oh, it's great. Yeah,
Mhm.
like I got you all the exams." And then it wasn't until the day before the first exam where she had finally had a chance to review my work and realized quickly that I had not done nearly enough new
Mm.
test questions. And I come in the next morning and she's all stressed out trying to, like, overhaul everything. And
Mhm.
that was a really bad precedent for me,
Yeah.
because now I've really lost her trust.
Yeah.
And basically, I was technically playing uphill from then on,
Mm.
because I'd shown her that she couldn't trust me with a task like this.
Yeah.
And I was still at that point where I just said, well, if I can find a reason why I didn't get the job done, as long as she, as long as I have a good enough reason, she'll understand that why I
Mhm.
didn't get the job done. And you learn very quickly from the entrepreneur side of things, or even generally in life, like, bosses aren't happy with that.
No.
Bosses don't want stories.
No.
Excuses do not get the job done. They are not paying
No.
you to make excuses. But I was still in this mindset that somehow, like, if I spun a good enough story, that somehow she'd understand that the work could
Yeah.
get done. And so, of course, the company, right? They're contracted with these universities, and their reputation is on the line. If they do not deliver, right, the university may say, you know what, we don't want to renew your contract, right?
Mhm.
And I just didn't want to admit that level of ownership.
Yeah.
That my actions and my role, like, if I'm not strong enough to carry my part of the plan, then that would seriously jeopardize my chance with the company. Even as I know, like, this was a trial run, and if I didn't really prove
Sure.
myself, that they weren't going to keep me around, or they were going to, keep my role very limited, which means I
Yeah.
wouldn't have full time hours, I wouldn't have
Mhm.
benefits or anything like that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, just a really dangerous mindset as to
Mm.
how to handle life. And just because you haven't experienced more adversity, because your mom was willing to shield it from you,
Yeah.
doesn't justify some of the entitlement and some of the hurts that you still carry
Mhm.
as a victim. Right.
Yeah. I'm a boss, so I can
Mhm.
appreciate it from the other side as well.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's that if someone else doesn't do the job, the biggest pain in the ass about that is it means that I've got to do it, but I've also got my own job to do.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's when it gets like, "Ugh."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the quote I came up with, like after being in manager positions myself, is, "Guys, you got to stop wearing out the goalie, right? Like, I'm
Yeah,
not paid to do my
yeah,
job and your job,
yeah,
and here's the
100%.
problem, right? If I get burnt out, and now I
Yeah,
can't protect either of us, so
yeah,
I the defender shouldn't just let the other person get by." And then they score a goal, and then the
yeah,
goalie gets mad, and the defender says, "No, you're supposed to catch everything I do." It's like,
yeah.
that's true, and yet like, don't bank on that every
Yeah,
time, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
absolutely. All right, so
yeah.
where did you end up going to next?
Oh man, this is where the roller coaster just got really, really
Okay,
tough.
this is the bit where we just dive off,
Yeah,
ready for the loop de loop. Yep.
pretty much, yeah, yeah. So yeah, 11 months after, and I have the last conversation that I'll ever have, and I'm just like stunned, and I'm just like, I drive out, even though I only live 4 miles from where I worked. Like, that
Mhm.
was the longest drive home, Gemma. Like, it was just
Yeah.
like, I can't believe I lost this job, right? I can't. Well,
Oh,
I can believe it. I just didn't want to admit it when
yeah,
the impact finally hit, right?
yeah.
Um, so the next 6 weeks was just scrambling to figure out, what am I going to do? I still got to pay my bills. I have no real uh, network to help me find a job in Houston. Well, I had some friends, but nothing was coming up because the market was much more saturated now.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, in Houston, there's a lot of drug diversion,
Right.
and there are people who are willing to open pharmacies in order to profit off this drug diversion. And me and my naive, sense of looking for work, I basically kind of got caught up in this spider's web of things. And what's even worse, though, is that the guy I ended up deciding to work for was number one, it involved a very aggressive recruiter who
Mhm.
was more concerned about her commission check than actually putting me in a good job position. So that
Mhm.
was the first problem, is that I allowed this stronger personality to dictate, my career path. But number two, so this guy apparently was really unreliable. And yeah, in the 9 months I worked for him, 4 of my paychecks bounced as I was filling for crooked doctors, and I never saw my last check either. Even after I kind of bounced after I'd gotten something else lined up. So yeah,
Yeah.
just a really, really bad cycle of, well, I can't pay you unless you move these drugs, and I'm just like, but these
Yeah.
drugs are jeopardizing my license, and
So
yeah.
what's the because again, I think because our healthcare system is set up quite differently here.
Mhm.
What does that mean? The drug diversion side of it. What's that interaction?
Oh yeah, no. Let me pull back the ugly, ugly curtain. So,
Let's have
uh,
a look.
yeah, well, basically for that side, right, there are doctors that for some reason are okay with just writing a combination of drugs for strict directly for money. So there's no insurance involved in
Right.
this. At
Okay.
least on the doctor side, people fabricate symptoms. They make up, the pain that they're having, and then so
Mhm.
the doctors write a combination of what's called hydrocodone and carisoprodol and alprazolam. So the trade names would be something like Norco and Soma and Xanax. And so,
Mhm.
based on the sessions that the Drug Enforcement Agency has given, right, this combination of medications, basically, there's no clinical justification for it. It just
Mhm.
gives patients like this really nice high. And
Right.
so the people who are on it either enjoy a little bit themselves, or they
Mhm.
move product on the streets because
Right.
that's how they feed their habit. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's just really ugly. And there's a specific manufacturer that is recognized on the street, and so that's always the
Mhm.
one that's in highest demand. And
Yeah.
um, we have all sorts of headaches. Number one, trying to get that in stock, just to
Mhm.
so we're not getting as many complaints. But then also, yeah, just the fact that you just have boatloads of people clearly that are not looking for anyone's best interests.
Sure.
And yeah, it's just a really ugly process where everyone's trying to
Mhm.
profit. And even though I'm jeopardizing my license, right, people
Yeah.
are sabotaging their own health.
Yeah.
And even worse, like, these bosses are willing to profit from all these people's addictions,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I mean, people from Louisiana would come over to Houston because they don't want to be traced at in their home state. Like,
Okay.
it's just all over the place. So everyone's
Yeah.
trying to profit. And and yeah, it's just not a good situation for anyone involved at
Okay.
on an ethical or physical health standpoint.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jerry, did your mum not have something to say about this?
So here's what's funny, right? And all this, when I talk about conflict resolution, right? Just this aversion to conflict that I ultimately learned from her and from other deferential Asians, right? So at the time, and this is information I've not shared on any podcast before,
Mm.
so this is like exclusive.
Mm.
Um, so I never set up my own bank account like locally, like because I just said I have a family account, I can just direct deposit, all these things. So when this guy would write me checks, I would just mail them home, like
Mhm.
because I had no way of depositing them locally, or at least I didn't. It didn't occur to me maybe I should set up my own bank account locally
Yeah.
because I was just like, well, I don't need to. And so these checks would bounce, and my mom would not tell me because she's just like, well, that's just bad news. He shouldn't know about this, and it's just like, no, I should know. Like
Yeah.
if and so the first check that was returned, like my boss actually told me, he's just like, oh yeah, that check didn't clear. Yeah,
Right.
we'll pay you. We'll be sure to compensate you. So I'm just like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Things happen. Okay, but then it happened like two or three more times, and um now it's like, okay, clearly this is not just some kind of honest mistake.
Yes.
Clearly,
Yeah.
there is either a level of incompetence or deliberate selfishness or evil
Yeah.
or apathy
Yeah.
that is keeping you from really coming through for the employees that are banking
Mm.
on you to take care of them, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when my mom told me, "Oh, yeah, like I didn't want to, tell you this bad news," and it's just like
Wow.
you learn quickly that that's not a good way to work, right? Like
No.
if checks
No.
are bouncing and all of a sudden I'm writing checks that are not clearing because my
Yeah.
boss is not writing checks, and then I can't even pay my bills for the month because my boss has shorted me. I had a In my aversion to conflict, I had a very misguided view of graceful, and despite this, I said, well, I let me do my part, even if my boss is not doing his, and everyone's
Mhm.
telling me, Jerry, if he's not paying you, leave,
Yes.
like, cut it
Yeah.
off, right? So anyway, yeah. So that was a very sobering lesson for sure.
Was that then what had you leave in the end? Was it the pay not going through that was the thing that made you say enough is enough?
You know, yeah, it's a combination of the pay and the fact that my license was now being jeopardized. Like I could
Okay.
lose my license for not dispensing
Yeah.
for a legitimate medical need, right?
Yes.
Um, and yeah, but the here's the funny thing was that um I'm trying to leave, and I'm trying and then, as soon as I realize my boss has established a pattern of unreliability, and I'm like, okay, I need to leave. I need to be willing to go a month or two without salary, and
Yeah.
because I don't want to keep jeopardizing my license even as I don't have a job. And I remember my dad, calling me and cautioning me and telling me, "Hey, look, like you don't jump from your horse unless you have another one to land on."
Right.
And I said, and I thought to myself, well, that's generally good advice,
Yeah.
except when you have a boss who is not acting in your best interests.
Yes.
And any employer that you interview with would understand if you went a month or two with that salary because you can't afford to stay
Yeah.
at a job where your
Yeah.
paychecks are bouncing and you could lose your license.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you end up going next?
So they get me on with this company. Money is extremely tight because they just started and they're
Uh-huh.
struggling to try to really monetize this niche that they've claimed for themselves to do pain management legitimately. And so a month in after they find like I had to wait like a month before they finally had enough money to train me. And
Right.
even after they trained me, I remember May of 2012 now. This HR gets me on the phone and say, "Hey, we like you, but we can't pay you more than 8 hours a week." It's just like, okay.
That's not even a
Um,
part-time job, right?
no, that's like no, it is a part time, but only for like retirees or like
Yeah. Yeah,
like
right.
part
A
time
quarter
moms, stay at
time.
home moms. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're like, I can work a day a week and have to be my
Yeah.
kids with the rest of the time. But I'm neither of those things. So
Yeah.
well, some friends of mine who work for a pharmacy nonprofit, leadership nonprofit. Um, that summer, I got an email saying, "Hey, a spot opened up. One of our facilitators had to back out.
Mhm.
Um, we know you've been facilitating on the fraternity side with like other topics, but for our national leadership meeting, we need someone. Can you step in?" And I said, absolutely, because I knew and respected these guys, and I was excited that they trusted me to present this kind of material.
Mhm.
And Yeah, and so leadership, much like a lot of things in that I'd failed at previously, I just said, oh, like that's hard, and it's just I'd never be good at it if I'm not good at it after 2 or 3 passes. Like I guess I'm just not going to even bother because
Yeah.
I don't want to look incompetent, and just a very fixed mindset about that whole thing.
Mm.
Much like a lot of things in life that I just decided, I was like, well, no, my life is over. I got to see here, I got fired
Yeah.
here. I
Yeah.
mean, my life is over. But now, right after having taught the material, and then seeing good leadership modeled for me, and
Hmm.
working alongside the lead facilitator on my side. Uh, I started to ask myself, what if I could be a good leader, right? I gave
Hmm.
myself permission to have that possibility now.
Yeah.
What if I could be a good leader? What if my best days could be ahead of me? Like, what
Mm.
what would that involve? Um, and so by now, I've been about 5 months in Austin, and
Mm.
by now the company said, well, hey, you can either stay part time in Austin, and it was a great team. Yeah, Gemma. It really was. They had two really all-star technicians, and the pharmacy manager I worked with was amazing.
Mm.
But they said, hey, well, you can either stay part-time here, or you can take on a full-time manager position that in Houston that opened up recently.
Right.
And um, by now I said, oh, I can't stay safe. I can't stay scared. I have to take on this challenge of being a manager. So,
Yeah.
and I'm ready to come home. Like as much as I had finally
Yeah.
realized that, it takes time to actually build relationships and, get
Sure.
used to something. Um, I realized, yeah, Houston was still the bigger calling that I
Yeah.
wanted to come home to. And so as sad as my new Austin friends were like, oh, you're already leaving. Like you only were here 5 months. I was excited to come home.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like I was still very conflict averse, right? I was better
Mhm.
about handling challenges, but I was still very conflict averse
Yeah.
whenever a technician was not performing well, or not pulling their weight or anything like that. And so um, the next year, actually, management ended up writing me up because I was not managing my team well, and
Mhm.
I was spending more than on drugs and inventory than they thought was appropriate
Yeah.
for the store. And so again, just had to I was tempted just to point fingers and do all these things,
Mm.
and by now all these other friends were kind enough to give me some really tough love and say, hey, no,
Yeah.
like even if that's true, like you got to own up to your part in this.
Yeah.
Like if you hadn't blabbed, if you hadn't, if you had handled things a little differently, if you had the courage to write up your technicians when they were
Mhm.
underperforming or even fire them,
Yeah.
you would not be in this position.
Mm.
And so yeah, I've just had to kind of, eat my crow, keep
Yeah.
my head down, just get out of the doghouse.
Yeah.
And so here's a part of the story I haven't had a chance to unpack as well in other podcasts. So this is a moment. The company had its funding pulled. This is like late 2013 now, like September or so. What happened was is that the DEA raided a bunch of pharmacies in Louisiana where we have
Wow.
some stores, and our stores weren't the ones that were in trouble. Let me go ahead and
Mhm.
preface that, but
Yeah.
um, they raided a bunch of pharmacies that they thought were dispensing irresponsibly, basically,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
much like the situation I was in the previous job. And
Sure.
so the DEA, they raid these pharmacies, they compile their evidence, and they go back. It turns out they all had the same supplier, well, which is the same supplier we used for our purposes. And they go to them and they say, "Hey, see all this? Like, this is really bad. Like, you clearly haven't done your due diligence, and your compliance department really needs to step up."
Mhm.
And so, to get them off their case, this supplier basically cuts off the top uh, 200 controlled substance ordering pharmacies in Louisiana. They say, okay, well, clearly then this is what we'll do. Is like basically a panic tactic where they say, well,
Yeah.
let's just do something to show that we're going to be serious about this. And
Yeah.
so when the supplier did this, it also cut off stock for our two pharmacies that were in
Right.
Louisiana, and basically corporate told us, hey, all the other 8 pharmacies in Texas, we need you to send as much as you can are able to be allocated so we can keep these pharmacies in business because without stock, right, you can't sell what you don't have.
Sure.
And so we did our best to try to keep those 2 pharmacies afloat until
Mm.
corporate was able to turn the supply line back on. But by now the owner said, this doesn't sound sustainable.
Mm.
So we're just going to stop. And what's funny is the friend who had gotten me on with this company, again, that aversion to bad news, right? He's just, I can't, I, I'm scared to tell Jerry. And like all, thankfully, our other friends stepped in and said, no, you can't afford to keep
Yeah.
this news from Jerry. Like he needs to know.
Yeah.
And so thankfully, he actually followed through, pulled me aside. Hey, yeah, you should know what's going on here. I'm sorry. And I said, well, you know, thank you for that. And technically, I was already looking to leave because, I wasn't happy with the way they were treating me. So, like, my situation really hasn't that changed. It's just a little more urgent to
Yeah.
like find a job to land my feet with. And so, um, this is another fun moment where I randomly got an email from a recruiter saying, "Hey, there's this, this really great job opportunity in Southwest Texas. Um, and you should apply if you're interested." And of
Mm.
course, I'm looking for every life raft I can. And so, I randomly contact them and submit my resume. And initially, I start to move down there, and I said, "Okay, this is going to be the job that I never,
This is going to
the
change
last job I ever
everything
need.
for
Yeah,
me.
this is the
Yeah.
last job I ever need."
Yeah.
And again,
It
for some
didn't
reason,
go that way, did it?
that 11 months mark is just somehow keeps being like the thing. But this time, it wasn't even. I can say that it wasn't. I wasn't that I was fired from the job, but the business model was not sustainable. I had to start looking for another job,
Hmm.
and yeah, learned some tough but valuable lessons in the process. Recognizing, hey, there's only so much control you have when it comes to these things.
Yeah.
So I just have to keep moving, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still fighting and clawing, and
And your
so
resilience levels must be up by this stage, compared to where you started. You must be more resilient. But what about like the skill set side of things, like with the skills that you needed slotting into place yet?
yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So thankfully, yeah, as you said, my resilience and grit have gone up by now, and you recognize what's productive action and what is just like hamster wheel spinning, right?
Yes.
Because on one hand, yeah, give yourself time to grieve, right? Like it's okay to take 24, 48 hours to just be like, this sucks. Like I lost my job, whether fairly or not. Like I don't have this paycheck anymore. I have to, I can't wait too long to start paying my bills again.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, now you realize it's like, okay, now having kind of gone through the mud a couple times, you realize, okay, what does it really take to get stronger? Like, what do
Yeah.
I need to improve? And yeah, that was one of the lessons during that time. It really solidified for me. Hey, bosses don't want to hear how you didn't get the job done. They just
Mm.
need you to. They just need confirmation when you get it done.
Yes.
So somehow miraculously landed on my feet with another independent pharmacy. What I have to remember is that when companies increase the level of responsibility, that is a compliment,
Yes.
because they say, "Hey, he's doing good work. Let's see how much he can handle
Yeah.
because that's in the best interest of the company."
Mm.
And of course, me, I'm just like, too exhausting. Like I don't want to deal with this, but I knew I had to deal with it. So at one point, they had me learn how to help get approvals for hepatitis C patients and their medications, which are not cheap. But it brought in a lot of revenue for the company, and so
Hmm.
I said, well, what's my alternative? I tell them I can't do it, and then I have to go try to beg for a chain pharmacy job that I hate, or
Yeah.
am I just going to get the job
Back
done?
in the
So
drive-through.
yeah, pretty much. Oh god, I just shudder thinking about those words. They start to give me more challenges,
Yeah.
and they start to see what else I'm willing to do to move the company forward. And
Yeah.
eventually, I get promoted again to a manager position when they acquire a new pharmacy.
Hmm.
And I just said to myself, okay, well, here we go. But this company was a little different in that I actually had really flexible hours. Scheduling was great.
Mm.
Benefits, they paid for my insurance, so benefits were nice. 401k match, and I had a really good work family. Like there were people that that did their part to like not pull their weight, but I had a nucleus around me of people that knew and were, well, I'll call them adults. They were like
Yeah.
adults when it comes to the job. We
Yeah.
know we have to find a solution. We may
Yes.
have to, and that's when thinking outside the box finally made sense to me. It's like,
Mm.
okay, don't just you can't think in terms of what you can't do unless it's like blatantly illegal or immoral.
Yeah.
Everything else, you don't know what it's going to take to find the solution. Just the crazier the better, right? We just have to
Yeah.
find a way forward.
Yeah.
And so this company lasted. My time with them lasted about 2 years, and again, like two of the, it was I had fun at work. I loved having time off and being able to take that whenever I wanted to, and yeah, like it was just a really great situation. Um, Unfortunately,
Oh.
yeah, right. No, I mean, but this is the stability that we all look for and realize that
Yeah.
the stability doesn't come from someone else giving you money. Like the stability comes from your ability to really make a life for yourself, right? Or
Yeah.
you realize, hey, I'm not in control of everything. There are things beyond my control, but if I'm willing to control if I handle my own domain well,
Hmm.
my chances of success are much higher, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's that lifestyle design that we can unpack later on once
Mm.
we kind of wrap up this journey. But yeah, so basically what I tell people is that my job, like these pharmacy jobs, are like icebergs. Like on one hand, leadership saved my career. I have more icebergs
Yeah.
to hop from to and to,
Yeah.
but they're still icebergs. So if they're going to melt after a couple of years, then no, I'm tired of this cycle. And so yeah, 4 years ago, when my previous employers, threw the put up the white flag and they said, nope, we're being gunned down by insurances. They're taking back our money. We have no defense against that, so we're just going to have to stop. A lot of people were upset with them, including me. And I
Mhm.
just remember getting on because I was actually on vacation when I was told to get on a company call that where they announced this, and I just said, I'm tired of chasing scripts. I'm tired of fighting insurance companies that dictate what I'm worth. Um, but I've loved teaching these leadership workshops,
Mm.
which I've been consistently doing since 2012. And I said, well, what a career coaching, what would a career in coaching or facilitating look like? What could that be for me?
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I self-declared as a coach, as I said in my bio, but still scared of failure, still scared of rejection, which doesn't work in entrepreneurship, right? Like you, um, and so it took a pandemic for me to
Right.
finally file the LLC, get some training, sink some real money, get some skin in the game.
Yeah.
And and people tell me, oh, so are things better now? I said, no, they're terrifying, right? Because it's just like that first year, you're saying, where do I find money? Like I've never had to think this way before. I've never had to wear all these hats before.
Yeah.
Before, as a pharmacist, money comes in, or
Uh-huh.
prescriptions come in, we process it, we send it out. So that was like generating business leads was someone else's job. But
Mhm.
now that I'm working for myself, at least on the side right now, that is my job. Like it is all
Yes.
my job. And
Yeah.
you learn quickly discipline
Yeah.
and the cost of discipline, the cost of hesitation.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, that's been the journey. So yeah, I've officially been open for a year now. Thankfully, I'm doing some private tutoring on the side to help stabilize cash flow as I
Oh,
try to figure out how to scale my business, things like that.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so as I tell people, leadership was one of my greatest struggles and has become a
Mhm.
fascination. And my aversion to conflict resolution was a struggle, and how now has become a fascination. And the tough thing to know with conflict is that you can you will never arrive. Is that there's always some new level of conflict that you will have to
Yeah.
deal with, and if you don't deal with it, don't expect it to go away, because
Yeah.
if it does go away, it means you've either lost your job or you've been removed from the other things that are surrounding the conflict, right? That might be good for you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what was your with the conflict resolution stuff, what
Mhm.
was there a turning point where you suddenly like the penny dropped and you got good at that?
It was still more of a gradual process, and I hope
Yeah.
people will take that to heart, recognizing,
Yeah.
hey, no one goes, "I'm good at conflict.
Yeah.
Finally, I've got it down." It's
Yeah.
like, no. Whenever people say that, I find that there's another situation that comes along that usually does a pretty good job humbling them. I know it did for me.
Yeah.
So to kind of unpack a little more of my conflict resolution journey, right? Yeah, had to fire a private technician. The following year, in the next couple of years, it was less of a problem because I had a good work team around me. But
Mm.
there was one moment where I had to really own up to the fact that I needed to improve as a leader. Because while
Yeah.
I was managing this pharmacy, I found that a friend of mine who worked for the company as a technician like pulled me aside and was just like, "Hey, there's a lot of criticism around the way you're running this pharmacy. You're not in trouble, but if you don't handle this quickly, like you
Mhm.
could get in trouble." So um, and plus there was some technician drama like within some part of the workflow of my pharmacy that I just wasn't willing to engage because
Yeah.
again, I'm just like, oh, like I got plenty of my own work to do.
Yeah.
And people were like, no, Jerry just gets on his computer all day. He doesn't really check on us. He doesn't really. And the story they were telling themselves is that I somehow didn't care about them when my leadership style is actually very introverted in
Hmm.
that, um, we come in, I check on you, I get out of your way.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even doing the check-in. So my assumption that they were adults and they knew what they needed to do without my help was kind of foolish, really,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really misguided. So at one point, I pulled everyone into a meeting, or I pulled my lead tech aside and I said, "Hey, I'm getting some feedback
Mm.
what I need to do and improve as your leader. So can I hear directly from you, please?"
Mhm.
And they took that to heart and they said, hey, other pharmacists usually check on us throughout the day, even if it doesn't mean, even if they're not at a point where they can help us. It just felt, it just gave the
Caring,
impression that they
it's
care.
really
Yeah,
something.
yeah, they cared. It's like they cared enough to check on you and just
Yeah.
ask and at least offer help even if it's not needed. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, so yeah, we'll start a morning huddle. We'll talk about the day, and then in the middle of the day, I will be sure to take a break from what I'm doing and see
Yeah.
how things are going. Another turning point for me in terms of conflict resolution done well was, at one point while I was a QBL actually, one of the pharmacists dispensed the wrong medication to a patient, or at least dispensed it to the wrong patient. And
Okay.
they're like, Jerry, you're a manager. You gotta address this. I'm just like, oh, okay, because this pharmacist kept insisting that she didn't make mistakes.
Right.
And when I sat down the team, because the technician was the one who actually input the prescription incorrectly, but the pharmacist did not catch it, and so this pharmacist would continue to blame the technician. No, 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 it's her fault. It's her fault. It's her fault.
Mm.
And it's like true or false. Um, you are supposed to catch and fix any mistakes before they leave this
Yeah.
pharmacy.
Yeah.
Yes. So that means, yeah, both of you are, I'm not happy with anyone right now. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the problem the problem I had with my approach there was this was more about I have to twist her arm until she conforms. Right.
Mm.
And that doesn't work well in conflict.
No.
Right. Instead of showing her that I was actually looking out for her by
Yeah.
addressing
Yeah.
this thing. Like I am looking out for you because I don't want any of us to get in trouble because
Yeah.
ultimately I'm the one that's going to be liable for this because I'm the manager. So
Yes.
if I am liable for this, then I have to do something
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
But I can't do my job well unless you do yours well, and that
Mhm.
is the paradox of leadership.
How much better are you now at nipping those sorts of things in the bud rather than letting them go on unnecessarily lengthy amounts?
Yeah, yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, I'm definitely better. I'd say I'm more like I'm not going to say I'm perfect because that's just I don't think anyone would take me seriously. I'm probably at about more like 60 or 70% because, and it's not to blame this, but I still have old habits that I fall into. Right,
Sure.
like when a technician, I see an error, I need to fix it. You know, my initial instinct is, oh, well, we're busy. Let me just go ahead and fix it, like for the sake
Yeah.
of time and convenience. And then if it happens again, you're just like, okay, no, I can't keep doing this because that's the
Yeah.
overcompensating is one of the most common mistakes when it comes to burnout and
Yeah.
avoidance to conflict. Or you're just like you don't want to admit that you're going to burn yourself out because
Yeah.
now you're fixing problems. It's one thing to like get to a point where a system is able to prevent problems before they happen, but it's another when it's basically you're enabling people, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, oh, you should learn to fix your own errors. It's like, oh yeah, I should learn to fix my own errors. Oh, they didn't. Okay, let me do this again. I'm basically cooking for people like my mom was cooking for me, right? And it's
Yes.
just like the
Yes.
same parallels there. What increases my chances of success is reminding myself how much longer can I afford to tolerate this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask myself that question, it kind of sets things straight to say, okay, I don't have to twist their arm. I just need to address this with them. I just
Yeah.
need to say, hey, look, can you fix this? Right.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, well, why? And I'll explain, my side of things. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Or,
Hmm.
and it helps when you hire people that are actually coachable.
Yeah.
For the ones, and that's usually the biggest telltale sign, right? When you
Yeah.
confront them with something or address something with them, do they say, oh, sorry about that? How can I make sure this doesn't happen again? Like, what
Yeah.
else do I need? Here's an idea of how I can keep this from happening again. Do you have any
Mm.
other suggestions? Right. That is the best way to get on my good side. Right. But for the people who say, oh, no, it's not fair, or this and that and this, and that's kind of busy and distracted. And it's just kind of like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Keep that up and I'm not going to be happy with you. Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I don't want to threaten to fire you. All I know is that I can't, like, no company can afford to keep around people with that
Yeah.
attitude. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
So you are doing coaching now. Is it specifically pharmacists that you're still working with, or whoever might
Yeah.
need it?
Yeah, good question. So the clients that I've had, some of them are pharmacy students. I've done some group workshops for them around basically, even as we discuss topics like vision and integrity and communication. There's at some point there's some unresolved conflict that people aren't addressing, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how it all comes back to that. My ideal clients are Asian Americans in their mid to late 20s to early 30s, because they're at an age where they realize, that they've achieved the success that their parents wanted for them, but then they realized um, instead of giving them permission to coast, they realize they've just inherited a new set of challenges, right? They're like, I got the MD, I got married, I have kids, and now you're just like, oh crap, I got to maintain my career for another 20 years, or
Yeah.
now I have to raise kids for another 20
Yeah.
years, right? And then they
And I'm
realize that,
curious as well around kind of in a way that they've maybe bought into someone else's dream for them. And I
mm,
think that that can work out well sometimes, because sometimes your parents might know you better than you know yourself. But I wonder if there's some animosity that goes with that sometimes.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, because there's always going to be, like, your mom is always going to be your mom. And so I'm always appreciative of parents that say, hey, you know what? Like, we don't know what they'll become.
Yeah.
We just need to we're going to teach them some basic skills
Yeah.
and maybe
Yeah.
give them some tools to help kind of discover what their real passion is or things like that.
Yes.
But we also understand that at some point we have to shift from supervisor to consultant. And
Yes.
that transition, is the timing varies by kid or parent or style or preference, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, like, oh, at 18, yeah, definitely definitely
Yeah.
push, right? Or no, like by 25, yeah, in 30s, maybe you definitely need to, like, have that
They need
conversation,
kicking out the
right?
nest.
Yeah, right. They pushed them out of the nest. They're not going to fly. Like, they keep that up. There's a great book I came across called "Failure to Launch," where the author talks
Right.
about kids who revert to a less mature version of themselves when they come
Yes.
back home after college. And yeah, that's a whole other thing to unpack. But yeah, it is. Um, and that's why I talk about the conflict in culture, right? Like, what is
Mm,
culture? What is your culture telling you? Is how do you even define success for yourself, right?
mm,
Success, because we thought was, and I wanted it the longest time, career, that I want, with a wife, kids,
mhm.
in the house in the suburbs, and like somehow, like, you have this idea of this picture perfect life.
Yeah.
Uh,
And did you do those
when
bits as well, by the way?
no, I actually just recently like started dating. I
Right.
was so afraid. Like, again, like, you see these parallels where I had this fixed mindset on dating for the longest time, and it wasn't until I went through my coaching program, and I had to barter hours with other coaches, and this topic kept coming up, and finally I gave myself permission to put myself out there. It also helps that if you find a more um, suitable environment where people are able to date, like, with COVID, funny enough, like, online dating used to be such a stigma, but now
Yeah.
it's really the best way for people to be transparent about their motives, because if you go to church, right, and you try to find a suitable woman there, I mean, you might, but what if she's just there, just to go to church, right?
Yeah.
Same thing like at the gym, right?
Yeah.
You could meet your other person at the gym, but what if they're just there to work out, right?
Yeah.
If you're
I remember someone saying to me, like, "You're probably gonna meet the man of your dreams in the supermarket." And I'm like, "What? Why is he gonna be waiting for me in the supermarket? Like, surely you just went to buy milk or something."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and that's what I realized. I remember there's an Irish guy I used to work out with, and he would tell me, I loved his confidence, because he would say, Jerry, if you like a girl, just ask. And, like, I was just like, it should be that simple.
Yeah.
But I've been in enough situations where that's not the case, and
Yeah.
or people don't realize the full level of the risk that they're
Mm,
taking, and that's fine. Like, you realize, hey, she says no, hey, if you like your life, you're fine, right? You're just
yes.
like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
fine. But if for some reason, like, she's like the happiness you think you're missing out on
Mm.
unless you ask her out, that's a lot of pressure to put on her.
In terms of where you are at now,
Mhm.
you are delivering workshops, you're also doing one-to-one stuff. Like,
Mhm.
where's it going? What's the
Yeah,
next?
yeah, great question. Yeah, the goal at this stage is, yeah, get enough revenue to justify transitioning out of my day job as a
Mhm.
pharmacist, or at least to cut back.
Yeah.
And once that scales up enough, yeah, let me be sure, I can generate some more passive income streams, like through
Yeah.
online course selling, or there's some great software available through Predictive Index, which is a company I'm certified with to help people with their people problems and business challenges.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to free myself up, free up my time so that I can really invest in activities and people that are most important to me. So that is
Yeah.
the goal. And I hope that doesn't sound selfish, because really the most meaningful activity is being able to pour into Asians that, haven't really had a leadership training that would really suit them,
Mm.
and a level of personalized touch to really say, okay, let's
Yeah.
get over this conflict aversion. Let's get over,
Yeah.
let's address this idea that, you've bought into someone else's success for you,
Mm.
right? And yeah, to really give them the confidence to say, hey, you know what, I need to start charting my own path now, and I need
Yeah.
to be okay with reevaluating it. Because
Hmm.
a book that I've commonly coached people through is Designing Your Life, or the concept of lifestyle design.
Hmm.
And when you realize that it is an iterative process, you start to realize, oh, you know what? Yeah, what worked for me 5 years ago isn't working now.
Yeah.
What works for now, I can't promise will work 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And I need to be willing to adapt for
Yeah.
that.
And I think if COVID's taught us anything, it's that
Mhm,
no, we all need to be much more open minded about adapting, because
mhm,
everyone that I know who went through that experience just holding out in the hope that life would go back to normal had a much more challenging time than the
mhm.
people that went, all right, then how do we roll with this? Do you still love pharmacy? Do you still love that work?
It's a great question. So what I'll say is this: um, we need good pharmacists for
Mm.
sure. I am very grateful that I've had the chance to work as a pharmacist for the
Mhm.
past 16 years. It is very much a privilege to have the knowledge base that I have, and have the license, and for people to even trust my opinions on things. And so
Mm.
I need to be very careful that I'm not subtweeting. Right, they're just like, "See ya, suckers!" Like, good luck. Um, yeah, it is a noble thing. Like, I have served on clinics in Beirut and Haiti, and both times, all the other healthcare practitioners I volunteered with, whether it's doctors or nurses
Mm.
or otherwise, are so thankful for having a pharmacist on the team,
Mhm.
because they say, hey, we get a lot fewer questions, right? We when someone is specifically managing workflow and inventory on the pharmacy side, we get fewer questions about medications,
Mm.
because we know you're able to counsel them, we're able to take care of that side of things. So that frees us up to really be the best doctors and nurses we can be, because we can just
Yes.
focus on diagnosing. And so when the monetary aspect is taken out of it, when the business side is taken out of it,
Mm.
at its core, healthcare, everyone has an important role on the team,
Mm.
including pharmacists. And yes, for that, I am extremely grateful.
Mm.
Despite whatever challenges I've had in my career, uh, people say, "Wow, you've been through a lot," and
Mm.
what I can tell them now is that I'm stronger for it.
Yeah.
And were some of the things avoidable or preventable? Had I just worked hard enough at my original company, yeah, sure. And at the same time, you know, it took a firing for me to really wake up, right? Um, and reframing well, I think, and looking and reflecting on that is a good thing, because yeah, I remember back in 2014, I told the friend who I modeled my leadership style after. It's like, I'm struggling for gainful employment since getting fired, and
Mm.
I told him, getting fired had to be one of the worst things that ever happened to me. And he thinks for a second, he goes, "Could you look at it as the best thing that's ever happened to you?"
Mm.
And it just kind of judo flipped everything. I felt like a switch just,
Yeah.
got lit up, and I was like, I guess I have to. But you know what? Uh, Even though I don't exchange Christmas cards with anyone there,
Yeah.
the firing really was done in love. And that's what I do my best for, my own times where I've had to have difficult things with people. I have to remember, hey, I'm doing this in love.
Yeah.
You cannot keep up this behavior, expect to keep working here, right?
Mm.
Um, you know, Other personal examples I could unpack. One time I had a victim roommate, right? I was like, okay, like, this is in love. You have to
Mhm.
leave unless you're
Yeah.
able to help, cover costs of living if you're
Yeah.
going to live here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just really tough things, but necessary things to say, hey, this challenge will not go away until you're willing to do more about it. And it's okay if on the first two or three passes um, you're not successful, because it just means you're not done. You
Yeah.
just have to keep going.
So what does mum think about this new vocation of yours?
Oh, she's not thrilled about it. I mean,
Oh,
it's not
mum.
that she's thrilled about it. It's more about like she just has her own ideas of what stability is. I mean, my
Yeah.
dad did too. In fact, I'll be happy to. I had a conversation. My dad actually called me recently, and we don't talk a lot. He's a man of very few words at this point. But unless he thinks that there's something really important to address with me, and I mentioned in my weekly check-in with my mom that I was like, hey, I've been tutoring again, and it's been really great. And my dad calls and he goes, hey, well, are the students that you're with vaccinated? And I was just like, you know what? I didn't think to ask. Like, I'm vaccinated,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
they wouldn't ask me. They wouldn't give me the chance to tutor unless I was vaccinated. So I'm
Sure.
imagining, safety is an issue. It's like, well, it just seems like a needless risk during COVID.
Mm.
And what do you even need the money for? Like, you have a pharmacy job. That should be stable enough. Like, that should be okay. Now, never mind the fact that my pharmacy job is being onslaught with like insurance audits, like my
Right.
previous company was, in an attempt to take back all their money.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I need some extra revenue to fund my business, because I started a business. And he goes, well, what business is that? I said, well, it's my coaching business. Oh, no, no, no. Like,
Oh,
I don't understand like what the
yeah.
future is about or anything. And so, and I had to remind myself that my dad is not an obstacle to the happiness or success
Sure.
that I want for myself.
Yeah.
He's just looking out for me.
Yeah.
And so, all I could say was, well, dad, thanks for your input.
Yeah.
Thank you for loving me and caring enough for me to have this
Yeah.
conversation. And yeah, I'll look to see if I can do something virtual
Yeah.
instead. So
Yeah.
that was the extent of it. But yeah, it's just to say, hey, you know what? My parents have their idea of what the world is supposed to look like and how it functions,
Yeah.
and it is okay for me to disagree with this at this
Yeah.
point.
Absolutely. And you're in the entrepreneurial world now. So part of that is the acceptance of the fact that it's not comfortable. It's not stable, not really. You're kind of striving for that, but then as soon as you've achieved it, it gets boring anyway.
Yeah.
And so then you kind of go, let's make another leap in some crazy direction and see where that takes me. And
Right.
in a way, it becomes a little bit addictive, because that's what keeps you wanting to grow and take things to the next level. So I think in some sense the experiences that you've had with your, what we might class as a more secure, more comfortable work life,
Mhm.
historically,
Yeah.
has almost pre-trained you. You're already mentally prepared for the ups and downs that would come with entrepreneurialism, because you went through so many ups and downs throughout your work career already.
Yeah, no, that's a great parallel to connect, because yeah, like I was thankful is in the middle of every pharmacy job going down, recognizing, oh, oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, let me just get back on the resume boards and let's see what
Yes.
else is out there. And I mean, even as my current job, it goes waxes and wanes. Yeah, same thing
Mhm.
with my coaching stuff. It's like, and yeah, I'll admit, 3 or 4 months ago, I was terrified because I didn't have any tutoring clients, and I wasn't sure where
Yeah.
my cash flow was coming from. And you realize again, really quickly, you can't just sit in self pity or anxiety, just
Yeah.
wondering. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you got to go after it. Kill
Yeah.
what you eat, right?
So if people wanted to learn more about what you do, if they
Mhm.
wanted to reach out to you for their own coaching needs, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, yeah. The website is www.adaptingleaders.com.
Uh-huh.
You can. There's a bunch of simple free resources for you and no strings attached. There's a free PDF download on a simple framework to handle hard conversations. You can
Mhm.
schedule a complimentary 30-minute coaching call just to get that benefit. There's also a blog where I summarize and distill useful and interesting leadership books.
Mhm.
So by all means, go to adaptingleaders.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look
Yeah.
for the conflict resolution coach for Asian American leaders. I'm happy to find you online there too.
Lovely. Finally, Jerry, if there was something that you could share with us, which um, is almost like a series of steps, a framework, or some bullet points for people to use if they are in a conflict situation. So, like you said there about the difficult conversations,
Mhm.
what is the best approach for people to take if they are, if they know I need to have this difficult conversation, I've currently
Mhm.
got my head in the sand about it, I'm
Mhm.
avoiding it, like what
Mhm.
do they need to do?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So the framework that I've kind of come up with, after distilling a couple different recipes for conflict resolution. The first is to ask yourself, well, what is success? What does a successful conversation sound like? Like,
Hmm.
how do you want this to go?
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't believe that success is possible,
Mm.
you can't expect it to happen. Like, it
Yeah.
might happen on its own, but it's not something you want
Mhm.
to bank on. So ask yourself, well, yeah, if this conversation was successful, yeah, how do I want it to go? Because success, doesn't always mean, oh, we're back to a point where we can restore and be
Mhm.
enjoy being around each other again. Sometimes success is, you know, evicting that roommate or firing that person and realizing,
Yes.
hey, like, you have to move on. So don't limit yourself to what success can look like. Have a
Mm.
couple ideas as to what success could be.
Yeah.
The second is to have 10 seconds of courage, and you say, okay, I don't need to be Superman or Wonder Woman. I just need to get the ball rolling, because as soon
Mhm.
as I get the ball rolling, now I can't back out. I can't
Yeah.
crater, because if I do, then I'm definitely not going to get any progress. So I just need
Yeah.
enough to get the ball rolling. The third is to script out those critical moves. So imagine what a successful conversation would look
Mhm.
like write down, be very specific about the things you want to say or the things you want to address, because
Mhm.
without a script, right, failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So you want
Yeah.
to have that. You want to make sure you address all the key things. um, then the fourth, though, is to rehearse those key phrases. Make sure you practice in a mirror. You look and see your facial expressions, your body language, your tone. Right. You can record yourself on your phone. Things like that, or get other friends to role play with you. Right. Just to
Mhm.
say, hey, I need to ask my boss for a raise, and can
Yeah.
you pretend to be my boss, and see what kind of potential barriers come up. And
Mhm.
then step five is to do it. You say, hey, I've drummed up 10 seconds of courage. I have a plan of attack. I got it, and I got engaged, because
Yeah.
you've already asked yourself, well, I can't afford to stay resentful for much longer,
Mhm.
because that's going to cut into my focus. It's going to cut into my productivity.
Yeah.
I'd better get this done. So
Yeah.
that's what I usually tell people. We also I came up as improving on another podcast. We talked about the 5 C's, where it's like, okay, you need compassion for the other
Mhm.
person. You need to have the courage to engage. You need curiosity to lean into the problem. You
Yeah.
need to collaborate on a solution, because it's not about egos. And then finally, find that closure that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Trust that closure is possible. So yeah, that's another way of looking at the framework.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. Very nice. That's super helpful.
Avoidance is definitely the first problem. Charging ahead is the second
Yeah.
problem, right? When you don't have a clear plan of attack, and you say, "Oh, I can't stay quiet," but you don't take the time to actually slow down and study the situation, and pick up on some key things that you miss if you just charge ahead. Because just because you have the courage doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. Like, yeah,
Right.
on one hand, it's better that you go down swinging than just to stay quiet, but that's not the only thing that you can do to guarantee your success. Yeah, not trying versus trying, yes, but trying without planning, also a problem.
Also a bad idea. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
right.
Love that. Thank you so much. So, for everyone, Jerry's website is adaptingleaders.com. You will be able to find all sorts of useful materials and ways in which you can reach out and contact him via that website too. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. I look forward to future conversations for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And how has it been talking to me today? How have you enjoyed going through back through your life story there?
Oh, it's been awesome. It's tough sometimes not to get worked up over some of the more painful moments that you feel like aren't
Yeah.
there. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, I'm happy to share my story, simply because I know what I wish I'd heard when I was trying to become a better leader. And so to kind of be that open book where
Yeah.
people can study my example. And I'd say this not out of ego, but just out of humility, right?
Hmm.
We always say, hey, we're just beggars telling other beggars where to find good bread.
Yeah.
And, when you have that attitude in mind, you're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, look, I found some really nice bread. I want to share it. So here
Yeah.
we go.
Okay, welcome back. So I asked you a question before you went into that one. Do you think that Jerry now has the grit that's required to become an entrepreneur, or do you still see A lot of excuse making going on. What do you think? You know what I would say about becoming an entrepreneur is it forces responsibility upon you. There's really nowhere left to hide because you are, unless you are delegating everything, which very often in the early days you don't have the resources to do, then it is all on you. I think this could be really, really good for him. And the other thing I will say is that he's in a position where he's becoming a coach in a subject area that he hasn't just learnt it because he likes it. He's been through it. And when you go to a coach who has had the experience, the lived experience, to be able to identify the negative patterns in you and then lead you around how to resolve those, that's infinitely more valuable than someone who's just read the textbook on it, for sure. All right, so what else? There was something that Jerry said at one point about bosses don't need bullshit. I am a boss. I feel that way. I don't need the bullshit. And there were definitely points at the early side of the podcast where Jerry was telling me about apathy towards his work that made me shudder, and not in a good way. Definitely made me quite uncomfortable from a boss perspective. But he came up with some really valuable questions and learnings, one of which was, how much longer can I afford to tolerate this? That is such a good question to ask yourself. How much longer can you afford to tolerate this problem? Hire coachable people was another really good piece of advice. And it's so easy, if you're a make a difference kind of a boss, to go, oh, but they've got some real confidence and swagger about them. They're going to be a really wonderful flair that comes into the team. No, just get the coachable people, get the people you can teach. And I think overall what I would take from this podcast personally is that tough love is super valuable. It's a lovely notion that all you need to do is love. All you need to do is love your children and point them in the right direction. But actually, sometimes deliberately putting them through a pain experience so that they can grow is going to have them thrive as adults. It's amazingly valuable to, be cruel to be kind in some ways. Maybe not cruel. Cruel is too harsh a word. But tough love is incredibly valuable. What else? So yeah, I think we got to a place where I could see that Jerry has made peace with himself and forgiven himself for the challenges that he put himself through in his early adulthood. And he's given us some amazing tips on conflict resolution that I think you can use outside of the workplace and in any situation where you need to tell someone that things are not going in the way that they think they are. There's a quote that Jerry gives us at the end, which I'd never heard before, but I really loved, which was along the lines of, we're all beggars asking other beggars where we can get the best bread. And I think that's a really good principle to take from just life. Really, just, how we interact with other people in life. If we can help each other, if you've managed to find better bread elsewhere, then share that information with others so that they too can learn and grow and develop in the same way that you have. I really liked that particular saying. All right, so I'm so interested to hear your comments on this one. If you are not already subscribed to this podcast, then please go ahead and do that. Make sure you like it, give it all the stars, give me your feedback, and I very much look forward to speaking to you all again on the next one. Bye! The People Building podcast was produced and edited by Gemma Bailey. You can find out more information about our products and services on peoplebuilding.co.uk, where you can also join in the conversation around specific episodes. The information, opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. It should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, we do not endorse, approve, recommend or certify any information, product, process, service or organisation that is presented within the podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced